everyone. So yeah, nice to see you this morning. Well done for coming out on a slightly chilly early morning. So can I just, so I can understand where you're coming from, hands up if you work in HR. Okay, so most people. So can you put your hand up if you've already implemented Appraisd? Because I know some of you have. Okay, and so the rest of you are maybe thinking about implementing. Okay, that's good to know. So just to tell you a little bit about myself. So I've worked in the learning and development space for all of my career, really. I did a business degree and then I managed to get a training job straight away. And I've spent most of that time in fairly large organisations. And in the last two organisations, I was able to build a learning and development function from scratch. And in my very last role, I was able to go through a kind of digital journey. So that's some of the things I'm interested in. So I'm not at Aster anymore. I've just started working for myself. My business is called Talentstorm, and we're very much about developing people and developing organisations and using really cool technology, things like Appraisd, things that feel modern and feel right for the time that we're in. So that's a little intro for me. So obviously I was at Aster, that was where I worked last, and we were a housing group. So I'm going to tell you about our journey, what we did, and as Rody said, we were quite ambitious. We didn't realise we were being ambitious, we just knew that things weren't right. So I'll take you through our journey of where we started from and where we ended up, and hopefully there'll be some learning and some insight that, you're all looking for different things potentially today, but there might be some takeaways for you in there. So, Aster Group, housing sector. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the housing sector, we provide affordable housing for people. So we have lots of people that look after the housing side of the business, and they generally are office-based. They have a desk. They might go out and about, but they have a desk. We also provide care and support for older and vulnerable people, and we also have property repairs and maintenance services. So the property repair, they are people with vans and they're out on the road and they don't generally come into the office unless there's a problem. And our care side of the business, obviously we have carers, and again, they were remote, they didn't come into the office that often. So, and the other thing that's unique to housing is that each part of the business has its own culture and their own way of doing things, particularly the difference between the trades and the office-based workers are completely different. So that was part of the challenge in coming up with something that was going to work for everybody. So 1,400 employees spread over a few more than 4, but predominantly 4 counties, so a bit of a geographical spread. And as I mentioned, we had people that were definitely office-based and came in and turned a computer on every day, and then the remote workers. And the other thing to mention is that over the last few years, we were going through a bit of a transformation and moving towards embracing flexible working. And what that meant for us, it's not just about the hours that you work, but it's about the location. So even our office-based workers ended up working from home if they wanted to. So we had a product with Microsoft Link, so we could have all our meetings by conference call. It would be normal to have you one-to-one that way. And again, that was another kind of factor in looking at performance management solutions that we needed for the business. So, going back a few years, what was in place historically? So we had very much the traditional annual appraisal, which was a lovely Word document that had been created by my boss. But because we had different parts of the business, they each take it and they tweak it slightly. They're like, oh, the trades guys need different wording, and the care business wanted to put extra bits in, and then we had competencies behind it, which again, different models had evolved for different parts of the business. So when we started thinking about changing, we thought, okay, what have we got? You pull it all together, and actually you realise you've got a bit of a muddle because you've got completely different processes. For me, in my role as Learning and Development Director, I was just really frustrated because it was a paper-based system. There was no central collation of data, and I'm just like, this is ridiculous. Why are we asking people what their training goals are and learning goals, and I can't get that information? It just seemed like a a really wasteful exercise, and I got fed up of moaning about it year and year and thought, okay, I need to do something about this. Also, as a manager myself, I had a team. I felt the pain of the annual appraisal because it was paper-based. Every year you'd go in and you'd have to try and find Word documents from a year ago, and there was multiple versions because you do a version, you send it to the employee, they send it back, you then send it to your line manager for line manager sign off, and you end up with 3 versions, and year on, the information in there, the goals, the objectives, all they're completely out of date. So then you end up looking at your one-to-ones to bring it up to date, and it just ends up being a copy and paste and putting things together exercise, which doesn't add any value at all. So I was frustrated. Lots of other managers also were frustrated with the process. And for the individuals on the receiving end, it wasn't much better. It took a lot of time to prepare and review. So it wasn't really fit for purpose, and that was, I felt it wasn't fit for purpose. Very much so. So I knew we needed to do something. So what did we want? So definitely, with my learning and development hat on, I wanted something digital. It's like, this shouldn't be paper-based anymore. I wanted to be able to pull reports, I wanted to be able to analyse data, I wanted to be able to look at trends and so on. And obviously if you're in HR, you have an HR database, so you're used to having some information, so logic will tell you that you can do the same. Also, because of all the things I mentioned previously, that it felt quite a heavy, clunky process, that we knew we wanted to make it feel better and be a better experience. We wanted something inspirational and transformational to breathe life into the process, because it was a bit of a joke, wasn't it? Every year people talk about their appraisal or performance review, whatever you call it, but it was always a bit of a, it's something we have to do, and it wasn't seen as a process that added value. I have to say, the idea of moving towards a more flexible approach, that penny hadn't dropped there. We just knew we needed something different. And this was going back a few years, so I think there's a bit more talk now, there's a bit more information, there's a bit more conversation out there about regular check-ins. I think when I started looking, sort of 2014, 2015, there wasn't quite so much, so I haven't quite had that eureka moment for that, I'll be honest. So, why Appraisd? So we did, as probably all of you have done, we did our due diligence, we went out and looked at what was out there. We started with our existing systems, so we had a HR database, a learning management system, and we went to the providers, because they all say, oh yes, we can do appraisals, we've got a system, and we looked at those, and oh my goodness, it was really uninspiring. And we soon realised that if someone's selling you a database, then anything else is just like a bolt-on, and they may not do it so well. And they would promise the moon, they could take our paper version, they could say we can put that on to digital, but it didn't look exciting. It was just lots of small boxes on a screen, and we really felt like that's not going to, it's all the work it would take to convert, it's not going to make anyone feel excited about doing their appraisal, it's just capturing the data. So we weren't getting too excited about that. But yeah, we knew we needed something flexible as well, because we had this complex business. So we knew we needed something flexible that would suit the different needs of the business, that the different parts of the business could use it in a different way. So flexibility was key. So even within that flexibility, we still wanted to create one solution. We didn't want to give in to the business and have them using different solutions, because that's just not helpful for anyone. And we did believe there was a way. So when we looked at Appraisd, and it was just by chance, by looking at some of these other systems, somebody said to us, have you looked at Appraisd? And we went, what's that? So we had a look, and just straight away from the website we were like, wow, this looks different, it feels different, it looks like an app, and nothing else at that time had that feeling. So we were quite excited. And certainly Appraisd had that flexibility, and it was that thing that it could be one solution. So the first thing that we did, my favourite thing to do when implementing something new, is to do a pilot, because it's win-win. You can go to your directors, you put a proposal together, you can say, look, it's low cost, it's not going to cost us anything, very low cost, you've got nothing to lose. So you can test something out. So we formed a working group. We made sure we had representatives from all of our different businesses. We made sure there were people that had authority to represent their business area, and that could go back and tell their directors and managers, about the project. So we handpicked and got some good people. And basically, we had two aims from this working group. We wanted them to test out Appraisd, but we also wanted to review and streamline our process. So, you have to be a bit clever, you have to sort of do the stakeholder management. So we made sure we got them together face to face for our first meeting, even though they spread from a big area. And we did the whole trying to get their hearts and minds on board and say, look, we're trying to want something better, we want to achieve all these things. And we said to them, look, we've found Appraisd and we like it, it's our preferred solution, but it's up to you. So it's making them feel like, they are actually there for a reason, and it wasn't, we haven't already made a decision. So that was really important. And they completely got that we were there to review and streamline the process. So, so I think we started the pilot, we had that all working, they were able to go in and use Appraisd, and that was all fine. We hadn't put the competences in at that stage, and we kind of realised that our competences were a little bit old hat as well. They'd been around for a few years. We had a new strategy, a new vision, so our competences needed updating. So we thought, okay, while we're doing the pilot, let's also do some work in parallel to review our competences and behaviours. So the project's kind of run in parallel. The working group was still testing the product. And even though we had an annual system at the time, it had the opportunity for a 6-month review. So that was the thing. We started the pilot, we said, okay, the 6-month review is coming up, use the tool. Okay. So, actually, I'm just going to go back one, because I know how to do that with the magic pen. So, what was really great while we were going through the pilot was we found that a couple of the managers were coming to us. Everyone on the pilot were managers, so obviously they had teams and they could use Appraisd. But a couple of them were coming to us and saying, well, I've had a new starter, can you add them on, because I want to set their objectives in Appraisd. And we're like, oh, okay. So it's not time for your annual performance review, but you're wanting to use it. And so we found that it was working so well for them that they already wanted to adopt it as if it was the permanent solution. And that kind of told us something, that we were onto a winner. So we said yes, of course. But that was a really good indicator for us. Okay, so it was around this point that we had a little bit of a hurdle. And that one area of the business kind of felt really strongly that appraisals were old hat, which was slightly challenging, because at the time, this is what we were setting up Appraisd to be kind of a replacement for that. So we thought, okay, we need to understand this, we need to talk to this person. So we sat down and, really said, okay, what do you want, what do you see as being the future, and so on. And they kind of were against scoring, which is fine. They were against behavioural frameworks and really quite challenging. I think when you come from an HR background, there's things that we hold sacred, and having a robust performance management process is one of those. So it kind of challenged us, but I really felt there was common ground underneath what their needs were and what our needs were. And at the end of the day, we knew that we had lots of managers that needed a tool and needed a way to have those conversations with their employees. So kind of reached beyond what this part of the business thought they wanted, and thought, I think there's common ground that we can use the tool that we're piloting and adapt it so it meets everyone's needs. So that's when we kind of thought, well, actually, it doesn't need to be, there is no rule book that says this needs to be an annual solution. And I realised that in our organisation, we actually had a really strong culture of one-to-ones. People liked doing one-to-ones, and it was normal to have a one-to-one. So we thought, why don't we take all the elements that we're using for our annual review or 6-monthly review and put those elements into a one-to-one process. Now, our one-to-one process at the time wasn't formal. Every part of the business kind of did their own thing. Some people had a form, some people just had a chat, whatever. So that challenge gave us the idea of doing something different. But the more we thought about it, and as I say, at the time, the literature and the articles on LinkedIn about this weren't really happening. At the time, that literature wasn't there, but it did feel like it made sense. So that's kind of what we came up with. We tweaked, our working group was still working away, but we tweaked what they were working on and we changed it. So we made it so that it became flexible. So it wasn't about a big review, but it was something for a monthly one-to-one or a chat. All the different elements that you have within your annual review, we put in. So the objective setting, the learning and development conversation about training needs, a little bit about career and how you're doing on your career, and then a discussion using our new behavioural framework. We worked to put all those elements in, but they were optional. So if you're sitting down for your monthly one-to-one, you might not want to go through all of those. You might just want to go through your objectives one month, and then the next month you'll go through your objectives and your training needs perhaps. And then maybe once a quarter, you'll look at your behaviours. But we left it so that it was up to each individual. And what we found was some parts of the business, again, as I mentioned, they had these different cultures. Some parts of the business took ownership of that, and they were like housing, for example. They were like, well, we think people should review all behaviours every 6 months, so we're going to encourage everyone in housing to do that. And we were fine, we're like, that's great, that's your decision. And I think what was really interesting was all of this kind of signified a shift away from HR saying, this is something you have to do by this certain date in time, and we're going to collect data on who's done it, and we'll come and hit you with a big stick if you haven't. We shifted away from that to saying, here's a tool, you can use it how you want. And actually, that's what fitted with the kind of cultural journey that we were on for our employees anyway. That's the kind of organisation we were wanting to create. And very much when we started talking to the business about what we were doing, and talking about the pilot, and talking about what was going to be made available to everyone, we didn't use the language of this is something we're going to stop doing, because that's not a helpful way to position something. So we talked about strengthening the one-to-one process, and we talked about empowering managers. So it's a positive message, and it really is. So I think I talked through most of that. So yeah, we programmed it to support a one-to-one process, and we built a test system which operated on a 6-week cycle for reminders. So people could meet monthly if they wanted, but they wouldn't get reminded until 6 weeks had gone by. And the reason why we did that was that some parts of the business met monthly, others met 6 weekly. So we were trying to do a catch-all and not annoy people by getting too many reminders in the meantime. And yeah, we combined elements of a traditional monthly one-to-one with how you're doing, have you had any challenges, those kind of questions, with the elements from an annual performance review. So it was the standard questions, the work objectives, personal development plan, which had a couple of questions on career development as well, and the behaviours. So the way that all appeared on the menu was they were down the side, like a kind of menu of options. So how did we launch that to the business? Obviously we'd had the working group working away, and so they were keeping their parts of the business informed. We used naturally occurring opportunities. So I know we had a couple of conferences, we got some managers during the time and in the run-up to launch. So I would go along and talk about the changes. I would put up screenshots from the Appraisd system and say this is what it looks like. And we would very much talk about the positive messages about this is about strengthening one-to-ones and empowering managers. And because they were like roundtable events, we would then give them a chance to ask questions and raise any issues and concerns. Also, because I'd been leading the behavioural framework group and work, we did loads and loads of focus groups on that, because obviously that's a really involved piece of work. So every time we did a focus group about the new behaviours, we obviously gave them a background of the whole project and talked about a new tool and a new way forward. So just by using those naturally occurring opportunities, we talked to people face to face. And I have to say, every single time, I mean, I was quite nervous actually to stand up in front of managers and say, oh, we're not having an annual appraisal, having this. I didn't know what the reaction would be. It was like pushing on an open door. They were so happy. They really were, because actually none of them liked the process. And it's only when you say to people, oh, we can change this, that they actually tell you they don't like it. So it was like pushing on an open door, and that was quite reassuring. So yeah, the key messages, and I wrote all the communications, and obviously we put things out on our intranet and did emails to managers and to employees. We very much focused on the managers as our target audience though, because we realised that if they were on board and if they got it, then they're the ones that sit down with their employees. And so, you know, we would draft different communications for the managers, more detailed than for the employees. But yeah, we emphasised that it was a flexible tool and that it was up to them. You know, they could adapt it to suit their needs. And the other big thing really, and this was a big selling point for us, was the fact that it could be used anywhere because it was web-based. So if they were meeting in their van, just had an iPad between them, that would work. If they were two, you know, a manager and a team member meeting in a coffee shop between where they both live, wherever people were based, they could use this tool, or if they were having a remote conversation over a VC connection, and it worked. So that was a really powerful message that, you know, anytime, anywhere, you can have your one-to-one discussion. You don't have to come into an office. And you don't have to log in through, you know, a system that's on the company system, the firewall and whatever. It was just easy. It was so easy and accessible. And the fact that it was intuitive and really easy to use was obviously a big sell. So, benefits of letting go. I think that, to be honest, I think the biggest fear probably came from within HR, right way back at the beginning. It's kind of, you know, it's what is performance management, what is the purpose of it? And I know that there were some managers in some parts of the business where they do have more performance issues than other parts of the business that were quite concerned. They're like, oh no, you know, we need to manage our people, so is this going to work? But once they'd seen it, they were so excited because they could see it would be easier to use, it would be easier to record conversations and discussions and objectives being set and so on. So yeah, we gave them that reassurance. And it all worked really, really well. After we launched, we did a snap survey 3 months in, just to get initial feedback, and got really good feedback. A few constructive points there, did make a few tweaks. but really minor things. So, for example, you might get an employee that's got 2 managers for a time, you know, they're working on a project and they've got their other manager. So just little system tweaks that could allow for variations like that. But fundamentally, nothing really changed. And people were generally happy. We had really good feedback. There was people that just sort of really raved and were really happy with the process. So that was good. So, and then a year on, after we launched, we did, well, obviously by then we were able to extract data, so I was very happy then. That was my happy day, that we pulled off a big report, just to see what was in there, and just to see how much all the different sections had been used. And I think that's quite interesting for me, because I wasn't, you know, was anyone going to use the training section and put learning needs in there? I had no idea. And we found out all the sections we used. Obviously, first section the most. The objective section was used quite a lot. Training almost as much. So you could see patterns there. But overall, there were 120,000 comments in the system, and that's just like, oh my goodness, people are really using this. So I was thrilled. More than 10,000 check-ins had happened, and that was great. And again, just the different cultures in the business. So one part of the business had come to us in that year, and they're like, we want to see the report that shows which of our managers are doing their one-to-ones and which aren't. So they were obviously on the ball, and we could say, actually, you can just go in and pull that report yourself. So that was great. But we found over 80% of employees had active objectives. 88% of one-to-ones were unappraised. So yeah, we've had our improved data, huge amounts of time saved. Everyone could see and feel the benefit. And the data in there can then help you with your other processes. I mean, obviously, the system can be set up in so many different ways. And I know when we set ours up, we opted to have a lot of free text boxes on things like training needs, because we had such a diverse business. So obviously you can't do a data sort so easily on free text, but we did do an analysis exercise on the information people had put in, and found interesting things that we wouldn't have known. So it is still possible, even if you're using it to capture free text, you can still get a whole wealth of information. Okay. So this is like the million-dollar question, and I know this is fundamentally why you're here today. And I think what's really interesting for me, and as I mentioned, when we started this project, I wasn't really aware of the benefits of getting rid of the annual appraisal. The work that I've done since, and the success that I've seen in this project, has kind of made me think about it more. And I could feel it. Back at the time, an annual process felt slow and out of date, because we were living in a culture where, you know, we all have a smartphone, we all get instant messages. If we want to know something, we can know it instantly. So I could feel that life was different outside of work, and then you come to work and everything felt slow and old-fashioned. And I felt that, but I couldn't articulate that at the time. I can articulate it better now. Because I've read things like the Deloitte Global Trends report, which is a fantastic report. If you're looking for a business case to go to your boards with on making this kind of change, then I would recommend looking that up, because it actually goes into the reasons why organisations need to change and what the global trends are that affect those change. So the dynamics of the workforce and workplace are changing massively. You know, we've got digital nomads, we've got people that just expect to work differently these days, and we've got the millennial generation, and they want instant feedback. They want their learning to be always, all the time, in real time. So if people's, the way they want to learn is different, and the way they want to get feedback needs to be different as well. And the way they need to capture and set their learning goals as part of performance management needs to be built into that. So it all needs to be agile, faster, continuous, and lighter. And Roni mentioned the new team aspect as well, and that's so important, because the modern organisation is all about networks and teams, because that's how work is done quicker and more collaborative and so on, and a tool like Appraisd can facilitate that. So for me, it's just obvious and it's a no-brainer now. And if I'd known some of this information back then, I would have put it into my business case, but it probably wasn't needed because I think culturally, and each organisation will be different, but I think culturally, most organisations want to improve their culture and they want to have more connectivity and be agile and faster and so on. So any tool that can facilitate that is a good thing. So my top tips, if I was to give you any, you might not need them, but just the learning from the project for me is, obviously your stakeholder engagement is critical, and where we nearly hit a bit of a curveball halfway through, if we'd engaged with our stakeholders earlier on and asked the big question, what are we trying to achieve through our performance management? And I think for your key stakeholders, it's not about, they're not interested in systems, they're interested in outcomes and behaviours and making the organisation better. So if you're talking that language rather than, we found this great system, it's not really going to float someone's boat necessarily. Definitely doing pilots or having a working group just to get that engagement from the business. And then just keeping an open mind as to what the end solution will look like. And that can be really hard sometimes. I know for me, I often would like to have an idea of what the end point will look like. But with this, we really did have to keep an open mind. And it worked. And we got there in the end. And just my last tip, which I didn't put on there, is just kind of what I just talked about, is I would say don't be afraid to challenge the business, because those global trends on how organisations are changing, that's everywhere now. We're reading about it all the time, so I would use that as fuel to say, look, this is our business case, keep up to date. So that would be my final top tip.